All right, here we go. OverDrive, off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app, your home smart speaker, and up on TSN 2. Bryan Hayes, Martin Biron, Jamie Noodles McLennan, Jason Strudwick. What a four-pack. Wow. Happy Canada Day.
Exactly.
To all the boys. How we feeling? Look at this. Eh,
never seen this group of four together. So this is our first time.
Everything's covered.
And we look good, and a guy who hasn't shaved and he's wearing a T-shirt like is just stumbled onto the set, put a headset on.
Don't get upset with me. Listen, how much time are we going to spend talking about the four goalies that signed today? Like, honestly, let's just get it out of the way. Let's talk about Cam Talbot and Detroit and all these amazing, how great they're going to be, eh, Marty?
Yeah, I got more than four. I got like 7. So, I mean, we could talk about Larry Brossois, like Noodles
Larry
calls
Brossois
him.
We're going to talk about. But Struddy's fired up because it was all about D-Man. D-Man getting paid. Like that Jake Middleton.
Finally.
Did you see that Jake Middleton, the kid out of, or not even a kid, he's like 30 years old in Minnesota. I just saw his deal. It was 4 years, 4.5. I thought, okay, that's total. He's getting that a year.
Yeah.
A steal.
Yeah, exactly.
A year.
Zadorov's getting 5.
Yeah.
6 years, 5, and you're thinking, what? Like, I mean, he could have probably gotten more.
Well, I mean, you kind of got to give him credit and his agent credit because they told people in Vancouver and Calgary, like, this is what it's going to cost.
Yeah.
I'm not taking any less.
He played it beautifully, but he also had to back
Zadorov.
it up with some good play.
Yeah, and he played well in Vancouver. Yeah. And he's a good player. He's got size. He's coming to Boston. And, yeah, goalies, I guess that's a big story today. I mean, we're not talking superstars, but we're talking goaltending movement and defense. I mean, that's ultimately what it was. Yet with all of that said, I think we're bearing the lead because as far as I'm concerned, Stamkos moving, like that's the story of 2024.
Yes.
Is it not the fact that Tampa basically said, we're just not interested in you anymore.
Thanks for your years of service.
Thank you for everything.
Yeah.
Honorable discharge. Get the hell out of here.
Struddy, you were in the league when Barry Trotz was coaching and doing all of that. Like, I never saw an aggressive bone in Barry Trotz as a coach. And now as a GM, he goes and gets Stamkos in Nashville and Jonathan Marchessault. I'm saying, like, this guy has completely changed the outlook on what type of person he is.
Well, I think of what kind of team he has, right? I think about those Nashville Predator teams, especially when he was coaching. They were hardworking guys, not a huge budget. They worked hard, and now they're trying to create a little bit more offense. Obviously, they've got some players there already, but then you add, the top two guys here, Stamkos and Marchessault. These guys can score, and they're trying to become a different type of franchise. And from what I believe, I remember them being with a more D and goalie focus, which I love. But now they've changed it. They're trying to be a little bit more offensive. So congrats to him. I think he's become a little bit different GM than he was as a coach and what he liked. And maybe it's different because he can actually pull the levers of decisions.
Yeah. Although it's interesting, like Marchessault and Stamkos, both right shot wingers who can score. Philip Forsberg has been their offensive weapon for years. Right shot winger who can score.
Evangelista kid who's a right shot who can score. Like, they've got a bunch of right shots. They'll be able to figure it out. We were talking on the panel there. O made a great point. Stamkos leaving Tampa, you replace him with Jake Guentzel. On paper, it looks great. And O right away goes, who's Kucherov passing through on the one-timer on the back door?
The same thing.
Like their power play might have to change a little bit with the base that they, like with the way they look at things. Right away, I was like, what a great point, because even though, it's a ruthless move and Guentzel's younger and might bring a different dynamic, that power play is what Tampa has lived on for many years, especially Stamkos in that one time. And Kucherov, who is an absolute assassin from the half wall, like he finds that right shot through the seam. Now, you might have to change your power play look or some of the ways you set up on the power play just based on personnel.
Yeah, and they will have to. I have faith in Kucherov figuring that out.
He'll be fine.
One thing I will say is I think Kucherov will figure it out.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, it is an adjustment, and it's pretty significant. Like Stamkos, he's off to Nashville. He's out of Tampa, and it speaks to the way that they operate in Tampa. And we talked about that, multiple times this afternoon, Struddy. I'm sure it was a similar conversation in Edmonton. Tax advantages in Florida, in Nashville, right? It's not a fair fight. You get Reinhart going back for $8.6 million, right? There's Willie at Nylander's a great player. This isn't about how great Willie is or how great Pettersson is. Right. They're both really good players. Pettersson's at $11.6 million in Vancouver. Nylander's at $11.5. Reinhart's at $8.6. Like, how are these teams supposed to compete with that when Florida has Reinhart plus $3 million.
I don't know how the league.
$2 million.
I don't know how the league handles it. And when it was brought up on the insider panel by Gord, he said, "Well, maybe they need a different cap system with those teams." And everybody said, no. And Darren Dreger was like, "Well, it's going to come up in the 2 years now before the end of the CBA."
Why would you not yell about that?
It has to.
You're in New York, LA.
I'll throw it to you in a sec, Struddy, but it has to. In the new CBA, it should be net what somebody brings home, not gross. That's maybe what it should be.
That's an interesting cap situation. What the net dollar is.
The net dollar. Because I've said this before on the show. When I was in Calgary and on the other side, we were talking about what Kiprusoff was going to sign for. Now, he ended up, I believe, signing for $5.83 million. But our whole sales pitch, and again, I'm saying but I was just part of the conversation, was 5.83 was the equivalent of 7.5 in California, in New York, all of that. Like we were talking about what the actual take home is, cost of living, cost of housing, tax situation. I think there's so much analytics out there. It's all data driven. You can have a formula going, hey, the cap's going to be $100 million, but this team actually gets to spend 107. Based on, or whatever, based on where they live because of that situation.
Yeah.
Like it might have to come to net money.
I agree with that. I think it's probably going to be more complicated than that because it's going to be, where's the Canadian dollar? It's very difficult to pinpoint like one specific. And what Bettman has proven ever since he locked you guys out was I have my system in place and I'm not moving. Wow. Like he hasn't budged on anything.
We had to fight a little bit, too, because I think the first lockout, Bob Goodenow walked in and says Bettman wants a $28 million hard cap that is not going to grow. I mean, we're at $88 million now, and I know it's, almost 20 years later, but he wanted $28 million. And I know there's smarter people in the finance of it all that is going to have to come up with a solution. But UC Saros is $7.74 million extension. He was trying to compare himself to Sorokin at 8.5 and more.
Right.
So he would have taken $9 million somewhere else in Nashville. He takes 7 3/4.
Well, look at the reports on Shesterkin, right? Like Shesterkin's looking for like 12.5, 13 million.
14% of the cap.
14%,
whatever
and it's in New York. You live in Manhattan. Go ahead, Struddy.
Okay, guys. All right. You are the kind of people that want to review every play in hockey. Why don't we just have a ref for every single guy and let's make it more complicated. I can't believe what I'm hearing. I'm tempted to walk away. I'm tempted to go walk away and keep cleaning my garage out like I was doing 10 minutes ago.
Put that shirt right in the hamper and away you go.
This is crazy. This is my nicest shirt. That's what I do in the garage. Guys, you're nuts. This is the problem with it. You're trying to overcomplicate everything. It's already complicated enough to understand how the buyout works and all that stuff. Do you want to overcomplicate it again for the fans? Do you think the fans want to hear about this?
You're right about that.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So listen, hold on. If you want to play in New York's an unbelievable city. You got to pay. I played there. I paid, guys. I was living life. I wasn't the king. I was like the gesture in the room, but I loved it. It was such a great place. Marty, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I don't want to make it more complicated. Make it less complicated. Okay. You're
That's
overthinking
fair.
this.
You're right, Noodle. You're right, Struddy. That's fair. And I think I can't tell you how many fans I talk to because we bring up numbers all the time.
Yeah,
like you have to. What's Marner going to make? What's Nylander going to make? And people are like, can you just talk about the players? Is it going to work? Is it going to win? And it sounds like a defeatist attitude in a loser's race, so to speak, which it is in many ways. But there is a clear advantage to the way Florida's operating right now, the way Vegas is operating. Now, credit to them, to Julian Brisebois, because he said, like, he could have still paid Stamkos. He chose not to. Right? He chose not to. Bill Zito could have probably kept Montour and made different things complicated. He chose not to. So they still have to get their guys signed. They have to get their guys to buy in. And you're right. I'm glad you brought up New York, Chicago, LA. It's not just a Canadian thing. This is not just woe was me in Canada. New York's got a tough tax structure, and it costs a lot to live in Manhattan.
Florida also has a good team. So
yes,
when's the last time they won a Stanley Cup? It was a week ago.
They were
that's the last
joke
time.
Before this run, too.
That's so listen, there's ebbs and flows and everything. Yeah, Florida's having a good run. They weren't that good forever, and it's gonna come and go. So I would like to see something, but it's got to be simple because I'm a fan of the NFL. Trying to understand that salary cap, you go on that situation, it is a gong show, and I don't want to see that in hockey. I think you lose some of the human element of the game.
But people still watch the NFL and they tune in it and they bet on it and they do all these things. I think.
Fair point.
But what it is if you're a fan and you want to dive into the numbers, have at it. If you don't, you're like, How is that? How did my team not get that player? Oh, well, that tax situation, all of that. Like you brought up salaries and when we played in that. I think the craziest thing, and I heard it today, we were talking about, was it Paul George? Where did he go?
He went to Philly.
For $125 million or something.
Oh, massive money. More than that. Yeah, massive money.
When I was in the year 1999, I was playing in St. Louis. Chris Pronger signed 3 years, $30 million. $10 million a year. Top players are making $10 million a year. It's 24 years later.
Yeah.
Where I get it's all tied to revenue and that, but basketball, there's going to be a $100 million player at some point in basketball.
But and I thought of this today. Again, it's not about, I'm not trying to pick on the Leafs or pick on their players.
Right.
John Tavares signed for $11 million 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
6 years ago.
COVID has a flat cap, but yes.
Of course. And the Leafs have a legitimate gripe, but other teams do in terms of the fact that COVID hit and it was a stalemate and it caused a lot of problems for a lot of bottom lines. And the Leafs have a legitimate beef in that. It's unpredictable. It sucks for them. But, Gensel's a winger, different player, not nearly as profitable, not nearly as promotable or as marketable, I should say, as when Tavares came up. But he signed for $9 million.
Yeah.
Well, he had 8 for 8 on the table in Carolina, which is $64 million. He took 63 in Tampa. Less taxes. That's another thing there. But how much pressure does Jake Gensel have on his shoulders right now to know that he has to replace Steven Stamkos? Like he has to almost score 55 goals for Tampa Bay fans to say, okay, we're okay with that. He had 30 last year. Stamkos had 40. He has to get to 50 this year to make that work for the fan base at Tampa.
But does he? Like if they win, you don't have to. You never have to apologize for your moves if you have somewhat success.
Yeah.
Like
and isn't that the point of the market, too, is that no one knows who Jake Gensel is down there anyway? Right. Like, with all due respect to the market, I don't think they're picking Gensel up, off the street. They will over time if he's there for a long...
a plane,
yes,
doing all sorts of stuff.
That's not happening in Tampa right now. It's not happening in Florida, Vegas. That's another thing. Like, up here, we're freaking out because people want success. Let's begin here with the Maple Leafs in terms of the moves that they've made. They signed Chris Tanev, 6 years, $4.5 million. They bring in Stolarz, so it's Stolarz and Wall. That's going to be their move. The Wall extension kicks in after this year, $3.6 million, I believe it was, for 3 years. Alvin Ekman-Larsson, he comes in. He just won a cup. Hakanpää. Am I pronouncing that properly?
Hakanpää. Ruddy loves that.
6'7", 220 pounds.
Could I buy a vowel?
He buy a vowel.
Yanni Hakanpää.
And Liljegren returns and Domi returns. I mean, there it is. Tanev, 6 years, 4.5. Ekman-Larsson, 4 years, 3.5. Stolarz and Net, 2 years, 2.5. Hakanpää, 2 years, 1.5. And the returnees are Domi, 4 years at 3.75. Liljegren, 2 years at 3. And Joseph Wall's deal will kick in after this year at $3.66 million. And Matt Murray.
I was just going to say, don't forget your buddy Matt Murray.
Matt Murray's back. Two-time Cup winners. So, Marty, I guess we'll go around the table. Marty, Noodles, Struddy, I can drop the hammer at the end. What do you make of where the Leafs are at?
I really like it. I think their blue line is a lot better, and it's going to make Joe Woll or Anthony Stolar's job a lot easier back there. The Leafs, I mean, this year, Woll is still in his early entry-level deal, but even the year after, you got Stolarz at 2.5, you're going to get Woll at 3.6. That's $6.1 million for both goaltenders, right? Like we just talked about. Bobrovsky's $10 million. Shesterkin's going to be 12. Like you're going to spend 6 on 2 goalies, hoping that tandem works. I really like Stolarz, and if Woll stays healthy, I think they may have something cooking in that.
Struddy, you want to go or you want me to go?
Go ahead. I know you want to keep talking about the goalies, so.
Okay. I'll start with the goalies. I think Stolarz is the guy they identified, and they got him on the prices the same as Nedeljkovic's extension in Pittsburgh. 2 years at 2.5. They didn't overpay for him because Larry Brossoit got 3.3. So you got your guy, but I keep coming back to Joseph Woll. They're trying to clear a path for him, like Jake Ottinger, like Stuart Skinner, drafted and developed. They need to see what he is. He's only played 39 games. So, yes, you've got Stolarz, who's a veteran guy I think he's going to pick up 30 to 35 games, but you're going to clear a pathway for Woll. Can he stay healthy? Can he be a one? Can he be a tandem guy? All this is going to get answered this year. Yeah. So I think they did the right thing there. On D, Tree picks up 3 defensemen that are monsters. Like basically, Tanev is 6'2". He's not like he's tiny,
Ekman Larson 6'2",
and he plays like Ekman Larson played with some chip.
Yeah,
like he
better bring
hard.
that back up here though.
Well, he does, and a little different in the regular season, but he played really hard in the playoffs for Florida. And Hakanpää's a mutant, so you add that into McCabe. You add that in. Now Liljegren is for me he's still a.
I'm surprised that
they
did that. 2 years at $3 million.
Overall, this team is better today than it was this morning.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
we'll see how the chips unfold, but I think the moves are exactly what Tree wanted to do. He got his guys.
Ekman Larson didn't even want a high five in Vancouver. That's how aversion he felt about hitting, right? He just didn't do anything. Then you watch him in Florida, and he was physical. There were nights where he led that team with hitting on the back end. So I think that he learned, and he brings that Stanley Cup pedigree to that back end. When I look at this back end, it's clear to see what they're all about. In the past years, Lyubushkin, God love him, but he's not a partner for a top pairing defenseman. I think with Morgan Rielly, I think those two guys can actually, you can say they're not a high end top pair, but they are something that can be, you can put them out there. Then the other four, I'm not sure exactly how they're going to fit together. If they'll put, OEL together with Hakanpää, but I feel like I can see the pieces because I've been on this show many times and I've challenged, that group. What are these 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 defensemen? What do they look like? I think it's easier now to see it. Liljegren for me is a wild card. Yeah. What can he do or what can he become? If he can grow, internal growth, I think it could be pretty decent.
Yeah, well, that's where Berube comes in. Right? Like there's going to be players that just couldn't figure it out under Keefe that maybe they figured out under Berube. And that's part of being a coach. You're paying him a lot of money. He's coming in here. He's got to prop up his guys. I'll believe it when I see it with Liljegren. For me, he's a third pairing guy, maybe a 7. He's played himself out of the playoffs in the past.
$3 million a year.
That's the problem, is that it's $3 million a year.
Domi is like under 4, and Liljegren is 3.
Exactly.
Good on Domi. Thumbs up on this one. Liljegren, I don't know.
For me, Liljegren's a regular season defenseman until he proves otherwise. He can be effective in the regular season. He has been over the last couple of years. He needs to prove he can be effective come playoff time, because if you're going to give him this deal and then not even play him in the playoffs, I can't really make sense of it. But I think I agree with the assessment that the three of you have. They're better today. I love Tanev. I don't love the deals. Like 6 years is pretty crazy for a guy who's 34.
They're lengthy, and they'll make people disappear.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I know that that's coming, but still, there's a chance his last year or two he's holding on by a thread and he's playing.
Right.
And it's a gamble from that standpoint. But over the next 2 or 3 years, you know what you're getting.
There's a CBA in 2 years, though, being renegotiated, and maybe LTIR will be different when Tanev gets to year 3, 4, 5, 6. It may not be the same situation. The Leafs think they're signing up right now and saying, hey, that will be buried, in LTIR in year 4 and 5 or 6.
That is definitely possible.
Files could change too, guys. Files could change. Maybe they'll have a different.
Yeah, that's true.
Allow a certain percentage of buyout because they got to create flexibility within the system.
Yeah. One thing that sticks out, there's a bit of deja vu because we do this every year. I like this July 1st more than last year, where they had Klingberg, they brought in Reeves.
Yeah.
This one, I can make sense of this. I know what they're attacking, but the 5 core guys are still the 5 core guys. And I'm not saying I was anticipating that changing today, but I can tell you what every Leaf fan is saying. Like year in, year out, there's been new GMs, new coaches, new centers, new wingers, new defensemen, new goalies. Everything else has changed, except for Matthews, Nylander, Marner, Tavares, Rielly. Like every year we do it. We're like, oh, we like this guy. We like that guy. This is good. That's good. Like how relevant are these moves if those guys are still going to be the ones driving the bus?
And won't be.
That's the question.
And we won't know until April.
Exactly.
Because
we're presuming they're all coming back and they're all playing.
Let's just say the team is constructed close like this. Okay, there might be a surprise at a camp here or there or something happen, but just this group is the team. You're fine. The regular up to April.
A really good regular
you're going to make the playoffs. You're going to get 100 points. You're going to get all of that. Can the 5 that you just talked about, the guys who can they elevate when the chips are down? You watched, we all watched the finals. Like Edmonton has pushed through. They found some guys who could push through, and they know what playoff hockey, deep playoff hockey's like. And this Leafs core doesn't. So we don't have that answer. So I'll pose it back to you, Brian, because you know this fan base. Is the fan base more kind of like wake me up in April again type of thing?
Well, I think so. I mean, again, I think we've stated for a few weeks now, like there's a portion of the fan base, and I don't know if it's 20%, 50%, 80%, I'm not sure.
Right.
That the only thing they wanted this summer was one of the core four gone, if not multiple. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to hear about Tanev coming in. I don't care about Stola. It doesn't matter. If you're bringing back the same core guys, I'm sorry, it's going to fall on deaf ears.
And I don't want to be old man yelling at clouds here. And Struddy, you may want to, piggyback off that, but the no movement clause are definitely not helping certain teams in situations. And now you got RFAs like Tkachuk in Calgary. He says, I only want to go to Florida. And you got Martin Biron in Carolina that's kind of picking his team. He's like, I don't want to be traded there. I'm not going to sign long term. So teams are staying away. Like the no movement clause and the power that's given to the RFAs are really making what is the problem with the Leafs right now. They can't go anywhere because of that. And Struddy, if they told you to pack your bags and you were on your way out 10 years ago, nobody had anything to say about it. You went and you played hockey wherever they told you.
Yeah, well, my bags were outside the rink. That's how I do it.
Sitting in your car.
Yeah, sir, you're not coming. Okay, sounds good. You're going to love it in this place. No, I think when you look at this group of forward or players for the Leafs, we know where the contract situation for Marner for Tavares, right? Tavares' number will be much different if he comes back after this season. But Marner, to me, is still the one that they have to figure it out. Do you walk him right through the season? It's not like they've been to multiple championship runs or on to the Stanley Cup final. So where do you go with this? So I think this is still a storyline. If he resigns, then it's obviously Tavares is the one who is, his number is done over next year and you have a bit more cap space. And I'm guessing the cap goes up, but it does feel a little bit like we've seen this show before. Yeah, the deal will be better or more stable, but just up front, I don't know. You get to the playoffs, like, you look at how hard Florida competed, like the way they battled for that the whole run. Can this group of forwards do it for, what is it, Marty, 20 some odd games?
Yeah, it's a long time, man.
Could be 28. That's the max, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
and we say, okay, we don't have that answer, but we actually do because they go to the playoffs every year.
They
have to change the answer.
You've got 8 years of data,
right? And the Leafs front office, they're putting their faith in it. The chips are in. Like Shanahan's up against it here. Trey Living's only been here for a year. He's up against it. Like they're trying to win. These moves, like they're obviously trying to win.
What about the Craig Berube factor? Like, this is the one thing, like, talking to a buddy yesterday who knows him very well, said, like, I think with him, some of the nonsense may stop. And what I mean by that is just all the window dressing as to, like, hey, we need this, we need that. Hey, what hat am I wearing for the game? And the dress. Like, with him, it's, like, cut and dry. Like, there's going to be some things where I think he's going to be no nonsense. And it'll ruffle some feathers because he's probably going to be short and curt on days he's pissed off with the media, like going, I'm not talking about this, go away or whatever. Like that might splash over into the dressing room, like where he's like, I don't care what you're saying or what you're doing, you need to play better, play hard. Yeah. This might be the first time these guys are actually, and that's not a shot at Sheldon because I guarantee you Sheldon was yelling and screaming and doing what he could. Craig Berube is a different animal too, just different person. He doesn't have that relationship with these guys.
That's
so he's just going to tell them, he didn't draft and develop them, and Sheldon was with some of these guys in the minors and when they were growing up. Craig Berube's walking into that room and going, I'm making my first judgment on Mitch Marner tomorrow, on William Nylander, on John Tavares. Like, you guys know, you get a new coach, you're on trial again with him. It's not just guaranteed, hey, I get my 24 minutes or I get my this. You got to earn it with him. So he might factor in with all of this as well.
Absolutely. Marty, you're going to fly here. You're going back down to Buffalo. If you're, like, you look at the Atlantic Division, the Leafs were active. Boston get Lindholm. They get Zadorov. We know Florida, they're going to run it back, and they're probably going to continue to spend. Tampa, they were dropping bombshells basically since the first round. They picked up McDonough when the playoffs were still going on. If you're Buffalo, if you're Ottawa, if you're Montreal, if you're Detroit, like, how do you dance with these guys? Because the top four they've been so much better for so long.
Yeah, I mean, Ottawa, I think, has taken a step forward, right? They traded Jacob Chychrun. They brought in Linus Ullmark. That's a Vezina Trophy goaltender. So I think Ottawa's taken a step forward. Detroit is all over the place. Detroit, they re-signed Patrick Kane, but, they had to make some room, like cap space by trading Wallman away for future consideration. Like, Detroit's all over the place. But I think Ottawa's making a step forward, and Buffalo, look, they bought out Jeff Skinner. I get it. If you have a plan to replace him, they got Jason Zucker and whatever. Like, it's not a player to replace him. So is there something happening, more of a trade, or do you think you've got a prospect that will take that spot? I think Buffalo is still in that question mark period right now. Ottawa, for me, had taken a step forward. So I would put Ottawa ahead of Detroit, Buffalo, and Montreal right now as a team that wants to get in the top 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Montreal knows who they are. They're still a year or two probably away, and they signed Slavkovsky long term today. Mm-hmm. We'll get into all that, but yeah, it was an active day. I mean, there was a lot going on. Struddy, we've been paying attention to the West too. We'll get into what happened west of Toronto at some point this afternoon and discuss different things that are going on in Edmonton and Calgary and Winnipeg and
Vancouver. We're having Canada Day here too, right, buddy? You're aware of that? You're aware there's a holiday out west?
I knew that one. That one I knew. Everything else I'm not quite certain of. I'll run it by you next time. Marty, good seeing you, buddy. Thanks for this.
Good seeing you. You guys have a good summer. We'll see you in September.
You got it. There's our buddy Marty Biron. All right, we're going to have Darren Dreger join us, Chris Johnston join us. We're tracking what Brad Treliving's been saying to the media, and there's a lot of signings, a lot of money being splashed around. We'll continue to break it down throughout the afternoon. OverDrive continues, TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line of the final score. Bryan Hayes, Jamie Noodles, McLennan, Jason Strudwick. We're here until 7 o'clock. Thanks again to Marty Biron for joining us. And as Marty leaves, here comes Darren Dreger, a TSN Hockey Insider. What's happening, Dregs? Oh, let's get that mic on right there. There we go.
We're give me instructions here. I push my own buttons here.
Yeah, he's nervous.
You're a nervous guy.
And I didn't know Struddy was on the show either. I haven't been paying attention. So now I got to put the
best T-shirt for you.
Well, we pretend he's not on either.
How's this look?
You look great. You look phenomenal.
How does that
You look phenomenal. So we spent a fair amount talking about the Leafs. We'll get to that, but Struddy wants us to get into what's going on with. Like, where are the Oilers at? What do you make of the Oilers' moves today?
Yeah.
They were up against it for the most part. Brown's back. Perry's back.
Is Snell stiffing on Janmark?
Yeah, and I think that they've alerted Adam Henrique's people that they may circle back there again. Now, their initial offer to keep Adam Henrique, I don't know the specifics, so I'm not going to lob an unfair number out there, but it wasn't good.
It was 10.
It was low. It was very, very light. And Bob McKenzie talked about this as part of our coverage on TSN. The Oilers have considerable interest in Jeff Skinner. Yeah. Now, whether or not that's a fit, how do you make that work? But, those are the things that you have to do when you're a cap team like the Toronto Maple Leafs to try and fill out your lineup.
Yeah, I mean, Struddy, I'm sure... are people anxious about Draisaitl and the fact that they don't have a GM yet? I mean, that's a big story, right? I saw Craig Button talk about that earlier when it was like, what does each team need to do? Which objective should they have? First and foremost, in Edmonton, it's like you got to find a GM.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, once the GM gets here, it's like, what's going to happen with Leon Draisaitl?
Yeah, I think that, it's one thing to sign a 1 or 2 or 3 year contract when you're unsure of who the GM is. But when you're talking about a massive deal that this would be, 7 or 8 year range, whatever it is, you want to know who's going to be calling the shots. And Jeff Jackson will be a big part of that. But Dregs, I mean, that's got to fall into place first, does it not? And then after that, you kind of talk about what it looks like and feels like between you and Connor and this GM.
100%. That's likely the path that Jeff Jackson, Daryl Cates, and the decision makers of the Edmonton Oilers go down. And to link a bigger story into this, interesting news, right, out of the National Hockey League, is they let Stan Bowman and Joel Quenneville and McIsaac up off the mat. I speculated on this during the Stanley Cup final. I mean, if you're Jackson and company, why wouldn't you have interest in Stan Bowman? And if it's not as a general manager, just bring him into the hockey operations department. Call him the executive vice president of hockey ops or whatever it is. But time is needed. But the experience of Bowman, I would think, would be very attractive to the brass of the Edmonton Oilers. And Struddy is bang on. Look, Leon Draisaitl isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And everybody on the planet knows he's top priority. But no different than any other player in Edmonton, Draisaitl needs a little bit more time to decompress. He's coming out of a huge disappointment, obviously. So let it breathe a little bit. Bring your new manager into the equation. Put together your best offer, and it will be substantial from the Edmonton Oilers, and then roll with it.
Why would
blank check?
Yeah, well, that's probably ultimately what it's going to be. From Edmonton's standpoint, it's like, how can we make this work? Why today on the Quenneville and Bowman news?
Bit weird.
Yeah, why would that be today?
So Commissioner Bettman would never really confirm this, nor would Deputy Commissioner Bill Daley, but we've always been told that they didn't want to allow teams to have access to those gentlemen until July 1st. I guess it's mostly because it's the end of a contract year. It's the end of the calendar year for the National Hockey League. And for all executives and coaches who are on expiring contracts, your deal expires the end of June. So I think that's why it aligns. But it is a bit surprising that they'd issue the statement in the fashion
with
that
everything else going on.
With everything else that's going on. But maybe it was part of a news dump.
Yeah,
I mean, there is so much that's gone on today with major markets. Okay, well, let's just slide that one in. It'll get reported, but it won't be the focus of the NHL.
But don't you think, too, it gives them, like you say, the turn of basically today it feels like it's the turn of that season's gone, moving on to the new season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You give them 2 months to find a job if they want to. And I guarantee you there's probably been teams that have called the league and said, are you going to allow them to work at some point? Because we do have interest. I'd be shocked if teams that were looking at new coaches didn't call the league and go, is Q going to be available at some point?
Sure.
He's a great coach. Same situation with Stan Bowman and McIsaac. They're good hockey men. So I think if you want to add to your staff, you want to do it early July so you can get them up and running for September.
Well, I mean, certainly, like a front office job is easier, right? Because you could be an assistant GM, exactly.
Right.
Like Quenneville, there's only one head coach. He's not coming back to be an assistant to ease back into the league.
Yeah,
like Quenneville's waiting to be a head coach.
So automatically, we look, and the only chair available right now is in Columbus, right? And we know that Don Waddell went through his process with Todd McCullough, Jay Woodcroft, Dean Evison, go down the list. I assume that there's been a connection with Glenn Gulletson post Stanley Cup final. But just poking around the Columbus Blue Jackets, I'm told that Joel is not an option there. And that might have everything to do with coming out of the embarrassment of what happened with Mike Babcock. They might say, look, with great respect to Joel Quenneville, who's padded his resume with Stanley Cups. I mean, you're not going to find, a more decorated available coach around the National Hockey League. I think it's just too soon post Babcock to entertain that.
What do you make of it, Struddy?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a slippery slope right now. When you look at Columbus and the way it went down with Babcock, I'd be really careful about how we make it happen. But these are guys that I think you have to talk about how you've maybe approach a new way of being in position of power, right? Or an important position in a franchise. So I think that's something they really have to look at, whoever brings them in. And they are smart hockey guys, but there's also the other side. And I think they really got to be careful with how you manage, because it's clear it wasn't managed properly with Columbus. Now, I want to change my attention to the Vancouver Canucks. And it looks like their D3 through 6 are the starting lineup for the Vancouver Grizzlies and not the Canucks. So are they trying to get the biggest D-core possible in Vancouver?
Well, I mean, but isn't that the want of basically every NHL general manager? I mean, not to shift it always to Toronto, but as soon as Treliving knew that they couldn't afford Nikita Zadorov, automatically they're looking at Yanni Hakanpää, who's 6'7", and going, we want to continue to add some trees in the back end. And I assume, Rick Tocchet, the one thing that he told me over the course of this year was, and it's not like the Vancouver Canucks are a soft team, but he said, we've got to add some size, preferably on that back end. That's why they made the Zadorov trade with the Calgary Flames in the first place. So this is more to do, I think, about Rick Tocchet and the type of game that he expects his guys to play.
Yeah, I mean, it seems very clear that that's what's needed. We had Ray Ferraro join us last week, and Ray said he has concluded the last few years, no one's more up close and personal. He's like, if you don't have size, you just can't win.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a small man's game. Like, it's too tough of a grind. You can win a round. You can have 120 points in the regular season. To win a Stanley Cup, if you don't have size, especially on defense, it's too difficult to get through the grind.
I'll be honest. I thought it was weird, and this might be on Vinny Desharnais, that Edmonton couldn't find 2x2 for him. Like, that's, I think they signed Josh Brown, was it? Brown?
Yeah.
For a lesser number, and he's a stay-at-home kind of, tough guy, all of that type of stuff. But Desharnais, like, I think he might, correct me if I'm wrong, Struddy, but there was a point there where he was playing a little farther up the lineup. he might have thought that he was going to get a bigger number and longer term.
Maybe.
That it's a free agent. And I just don't know if it was there.
Yeah, I thought he might get 3 years, and I've got a real soft spot for a guy that kind of finds his way into the NHL past 25 years old, right? And he's worked hard to get his game. But, maybe the Oilers felt the difference between Vinny at $2 million and Josh Brown at $1 million isn't that great. I think you also have to look at the emergence of Broberg, right? Broberg needed a place to play. He needed to be there. He needs to be in every night. So Joshua Brown, to me, is a clear 7th defenseman, whereas with Finney, he probably wants to be that 5-6. A little bit different situation fit.
With Darren Dreger, so I think the news of the day is Stamkos. Like the fact that he's out in Tampa, he jumped right onto a moving train in Nashville. He didn't take long, right? Like he was ready to go. Signs 4 years at $8 million per in Nashville. Marchessault joins him in Nashville. Did this get ugly? Like, how would you describe? Like, obviously,
Ruthless.
It got emotional.
It's ruthless, though.
But like, how would this have ended? Is this just Brisebois not returning calls? Was he forthright? Said Steven, like, we're done. Like, sorry, we're out of here. Or does Stamkos not really need to be told that when they acquire Gensel? It's like, sorry, pal, just read the room here. We're at the end of the road. You got to find somewhere else to play.
Yeah, I think more of the latter. Stamkos, I don't believe, saw that coming, right? So as soon as they make the Sergachev trade, then it became pretty apparent what direction they were going to go. Now, some of us wondered, okay, well, can they find a way to get both guys into the mix? And that being Gensel and Stamkos. But they didn't really re-engage with Donnie Meehan and Newport. And I think it was reported, I'm sure it was, in fact, just off memory here. I believe that one of the original offers from the Lightning on Stamkos was like maximum term 8 years, but around $3 million AAV. Wow. I mean, he's willing to take that hometown discount, but the term does matter. But come on, he's worth more than that. Mm-hmm. I think that Stammer would have been happy to stay in Tampa Bay around 4.5. Maybe not at 8 years. Maybe the term would have been less. So I wouldn't say it got ugly, but I would say that there was a high level of disappointment. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it here for a second. This guy, among the most beloved athletes in Tampa Bay history, not hockey, across the board.
Absolutely.
Which is saying a lot when you look at this, the win stories of Tampa Bay. So disappointing for sure, but wonderful work by the Nashville Predators overall.
Drex, my question is this. This feels like one of the first times we've seen a legacy player of the team kind of be moved out. Like Brisebois, he may think, you know what, maybe he doesn't have as many years as we want, and we're going to move in a different direction. Does this kind of start for the NHL? Because we've seen other teams kind of hang on to their stars, and I get it. I mean, they've done so many good things for you.
Yeah.
Is this maybe start the trend, or can you remember another situation where this happened?
Nah, I mean, this is a difficult one for sure. I mean, automatically, as you ask the question, Struddy, we're all thinking about Sid. We're all thinking about Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins. And it's important to note that ownership group in Pittsburgh, Fenway, ruthless. So they would look at this example and what the Tampa Bay Lightning did. This would not have been easy for the Vinnick family in Tampa Bay to sign off on this. It is a business first. I mean, that's what major sport is all about. Right. But I'm sure that Fenway is looking at the business done by the Tampa Bay Lightning and going, okay, Kyle, you better buckle up because we've got to change the direction of this club. Now, there are some who wonder, okay, what's Sid thinking? What's Crosby thinking? Is he so sure that he wants to extend and go through what, is easily going to be a reset, if not a full-scale renovation?
Look what they've done nothing, basically.
Who they just
They picked up Kevin Hayes.
Which is the most
slower and older.
It's the weird. He's 32.
Yeah.
I can't make sense of that.
And they traded Riley Smith, the guy they acquired last year. I mean, they missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. I've been leading that charge for months. Get them out, but it's on Sid to do that. The difference here is Tampa still thinks they can win.
Yeah.
Like Pittsburgh can't think that. Like if you move off Sid, that's because you're saying we're brutal. We got to move. We got to adjust here. Tampa's like, we think we can win, and we can't win with you.
Because of the spine of their team.
We need something else.
The spine of their team still has 20s in it.
Yeah.
Vasilevsky and
Point and Kucherov and Cirelli and Hagel.
Right. Yeah. Hedman's the outlier.
But he's 32.
Right. So I think that's where it's so ruthless. It's like, we're fine. Like they're almost getting ahead of what they think will be a drop-off.
Yeah.
And
which is smart. Like taking emotion out of it. Gensel is going to be a more impactful and effective player than Stamkos will be.
At some point. Like maybe next year, right?
5-on-5, I don't think, like Stamkos is not who he was a few years ago.
Right.
No.
Like 40 goals is incredible, but when Kucherov's putting on your stick,
right,
it's helpful.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's a power play
specialist. Yes,
he's still a very good player, but at 5-on-5, he's not as dominant as he once was.
It's just it might start a trend, Struddy. It might start a trend where you're seeing these legacy players or players that you think, okay, we love this guy for the next 2 years, but we got to sign him to 8 because we're going to try and make the number.
Right.
Or we're going to take that cap space.
See, this is the point.
That's where you're going.
This is the point, is that, and we'll use the Toronto example, right? With Mitch. It's like you can't replace Mitch.
No.
Tampa replaced him with Gensel.
Yeah.
You can. You just got to sign the next guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Like it's not, I know it's not apples to apples and it's not necessarily easy and it can be difficult to deal with, but if there's someone else that comes up,
right,
and you're like, I got $12 million I can spend on player A or player B, and player B is a really good option too. It's not necessarily a fall off.
Right.
It's just a different
look.
It's a different look.
You have to have
may not be the right one.
You got to have the stones to do it too.
Yeah.
It's a courageous play, man. I got a lot of time for it.
Well, go back to
it's a ballsy move. But
go back to Bill Zito.
Yeah.
Jonathan Huberdeau.
Thanks for coming up.
Best friend Barkov, 115 points.
Mr. Florida.
Mr. Florida, driving a Lamborghini. You're going to Calgary.
Yeah.
I mean,
buckle up.
Obviously, the difference here, and we've discussed many of the differences. Stamkos clearly wanted to finish his career with the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah.
And I would think that in a perfect world, Crosby would have as well, but there are some who don't think they think he's okay with not finishing his career in Pittsburgh.
But how do you see a win?
I like that
now?
idea.
You look at that team, I just don't see how they're going to start winning. I played on some bad teams, but I was not Sidney Crosby, that's for sure.
Yeah. No, you weren't. That's for sure. That is an accurate statement.
Confirmed.
Wow.
Neither was I, Struddy. All right, Dregs, thanks for doing this, man. I know it's been a busy day, busy time of year. We appreciate you popping in.
Okay, guys.
And we'll see what. I guess there's still more action to come, right? At some point in the next.
Leafs aren't done yet.
You think they're still?
Yeah, they're going to dabble on a forward. I mean, the Skinner thing we've already talked about.
Do you think the Leafs are linked to Skinner? Or
yeah.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
Maybe a depth add like Mason Shaw. Like,
Okay.
Yeah, they're going to add. They've still got a bit
nibbling on guys, but the thing is a guy like Jeff Skinner, it's not about money now. It's going to be about fit.
Right.
Right. Like, isn't it good? I mean,
I think the sales pitch to him is, you want to play with Marner and Matthews. I'm not sure that's the right fit.
And Edmonton is probably saying the same thing.
Probably.
Play with Draisaitl or McDavid.
Pick your poison.
And Kane, depending on his situation, like that left side, Warren Fogel's gone now. It sounds like he went to LA. So that left side might have some openings in Edmonton. Depends on the price point Jeff Skinner would choose. He could have two Skinners on the same team, non-related.
Wow.
Well, you know who won't be talking about any of that?
You?
This guy.
Okay, that's the end of the road. All right, buddy. Have a great summer.
Rest up.
There he is. Good
Use
seeing you.
sunscreen.
Darren Dreger, a TSN Hockey Insider. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, Chris Johnston will join us around the table at 6 o'clock. Maybe a little strut or dud on Canada Day. That's what Canadians are looking for,
strut
right?
or dud. I love it.
Yeah.
I think so, Strutty. We'll get the oven cooking there and get some strud muffins in there and start baking.
Wow. Lots of topics for the muffin tops.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And, there's always winners and losers that really it's not relevant come puck drop in the fall. There's going to be more moves.
Right.
Nashville made a massive splash, but
I told you all hell was going to break loose.
Yeah, no, listen, you said it with like the Stamkos. That is significant. I think Marchessault going there as well is a little bit confusing to me because, the right shot, really offensive players. From a Canadian standpoint, I find it interesting. Like, I kind of like where the Habs are right now. I got to be honest. And I like the Leafs are in a different spot. Edmonton's in a different spot. Winnipeg awfully quiet. They lost guys. They got to figure something out here.
Right.
But Montreal, I think, realizes we're just not in a position to pay for play because we're not good enough.
Not yet.
Not yet. So we're going to keep our space. We're going to keep our flexibility. They give Slavkovsky an year extension at 7.6, which will kick in after this year. Right. But they're banking on Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky at a minimum being $7 million players.
Right.
Like that's the floor. And if they exceed that, then it's a great gamble.
Right.
But I kind of like, from their standpoint, like don't try to push it because you're not there yet. You're not good enough yet. You got to let it.
Don't waste a bunch of money on players to try and help them grow yet. Like you just chip away, keep growing. They've kind of got some money there that there are guys. Gallagher's still there.
They got to
Rush Anderson,
figure that out.
Like that's your older guys. That's your, hey, we're going to let these contracts expire and roll through. You might spend the money to replace those guys at some point.
Right.
But you're right. They didn't have to do much because they know exactly where they are. They're talking about internal growth.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out in hockey for Slavkovsky, he can be a model. That guy is like a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, he's a beast, man.
Jacked.
God.
Chiseled.
I walked by him in
now
the
he's
hallway.
paid.
Like he is jacked.
Yeah.
He's 19, isn't he?
Yeah, he's been in the league 2 years. So again, I'm sure there are Habs fans saying, "Come on, let's go." I guess what I'm saying, what I appreciate is the front office understands, like, continue to play the long game because you're not competing with Florida, Tampa, Toronto, Boston right now.
Right.
Like you're not. You're going to wait for one of those teams, if not 2 or 3 of them, to get over the hill and move the wrong way.
Time to move on, and then you go in.
Time it perfectly.
Yeah.
And I think Montreal is biding their time. That doesn't mean all these guys are going to hit. Doesn't mean it's going to work. But I actually appreciate their patience right now. But it was awfully quiet in Montreal.
Yeah.
All right, more on free agent frenzy and moves in Toronto, moves throughout the country, moves throughout the league. Chris Johnston will join us into the final hour. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2.